Hey folks, so we did not get the opportunity to finish the pair deck that I had on interviewing basics yesterday. However, what I'm going to do today is talk you through it. You won't actually do the pair deck portion anymore, but there's a couple more things I wanted to review about the interview process before I set you off on today's activity, which is taking a look at what makes a good interview and a bad interview, as well as how to write good open-ended questions. So this is a slide we left up on yesterday about what is an open-ended question and why are they better to ask. In this case, we've been getting a lot of feedback from Ben Montgomery, the professional reporter that we have featured video bits from. He said he never writes questions. I'm going to argue that he probably just goes in with a lot of questions in mind, but until you're a professional with a successful book contract and doing this for a living, you need to write questions. And that's not to prescribe exactly how the interview is supposed to go, but to help you focus on what you need to know and how to ask for the questions, for the information that you need. All right, let's talk about developing your questions. You want to have what are called softball questions to start with, and those are questions that are like just to create a soft, conversational tone. Questions like, "Hey, so tell me a little bit about how you got this job," or "How long have you been playing football," or "How your class is going this year." Something like that. They're just designed to get your source comfortable with you and to establish a loose, comfortable tone so that when you get to the question specifically about whatever story you're covering, that they will then be more at ease with you. It also lets them know, or lets you understand what they know about what this interview's about. Okay, so in other words, like if they don't even know what you're talking to them about, it kind of will warm them up if you start asking related questions to the topic that you're going to be covering. Listening is critical. I mean, this is in huge bold font here, and I can't emphasize that enough. People who are good reporters are good listeners. You are going to go into your interviews with lots of questions, but you're not going to expect to answer them all because you're going to be listening for maybe the follow-up or opportunities to ask follow-up questions on something that was so interesting you didn't even anticipate it. And that's very key. The discussion right now, we're going to launch a little tidbit about the importance of research and listening. So let me highlight this tidbit from him.
So there's almost like this value to listening that earns you the story. It's like making deposits into the story by being an engaged listener. And it's pretty rare in my experience in modern society that people truly listen. I'll bring up a personal anecdote. When I get home from a day of reporting, one of my wife's common complaints is, "You're not listening to me," and my excuse all the time is this is work. I've spent 8 hours today intensely listening to someone else, and so in downtime I sometimes want to shut that off. But that's when you've hit that feeling where you there's a work involved in listening. That's when you're in your paycheck, that's when stuff is getting good.
Okay, so I really, really like his emphasis on that. That it's work to listen. It seems like a passive thing, except when you're a reporter and you're really trying to get a source to open up and you're really trying to understand something that they can provide insight into, listening is key. 3 tips that he provided in a nutshell. Do your research, ask open-ended questions. Questions like why, how, or what happened. And listen to the answers because that's where the money is sometimes, when you can ask follow-up questions based on something they said. And again, he earlier in our videos talked about, being curious and being empathetic are also incredibly valuable traits of a good reporter. If you're curious, you ask those follow-up questions. All right, other tips going into interviews. You've done your background research, you have developed your questions, you have to check your tech, okay? And we'll focus more on this next week when it comes to if you're doing broadcast equipment, video, making sure your batteries are charged. You're in a place that is conducive to good interviewing where it's not crazy loud, or if you're doing video, bad lighting. If you're taking notes, pens have ink, and reporters' notebooks. You got those yesterday. You have them in hand, and it's prepared with questions. I'm going to listen to some advice from Ben Montgomery here about how to approach the people you need to interview.
Approach the person as a person first, not as a reporter. Obviously identify yourself, but keep your notebook in your pocket, keep your video camera in the TV truck or whatever. Just be a person. Try to find some kind of human connection with your subject. Be honest about where you're coming from. You never want to be sneaky about what you're working on. So if we're going to have an interview over something that's controversial, I'm not going to pretend that I'm interviewing about the book you just wrote or whatever. I want to be upfront. Here's what I'm thinking, and here's what I'd like to ask you about. A useful tip is for me, very simple, but keep your notebook in your pocket as much as possible. And when somebody says something great, pull it out and almost use it as a tool. This is actually from Ben Kramer, I think. Pull it out and say, I like what you said, I'm going to write that down. And then put it back in your pocket, and the other person spends the rest of the interview trying to say something better than what they said before, so that you'll write it down. Get on someone's level. And this applies to dress. It applies to your physical presence. If I'm gonna showed up at this thing to do this presentation today, and I brought a suit, like with the smart suit jacket and navy pants and shiny brown shoes, and I thought, I'm not gonna wear a freaking suit to talk to high school kids. Like, I won't be able to connect there. So I wore a t-shirt. It's the same for interviewing. If you're going to talk to a farmer, you're not going to show up in a suit and tie, because it's going to be a stumbling block there just because of the way you look. Think about these things in advance. Then in a physical way, I always try to get lower than the person I'm talking to. If you and I are talking and I'm standing up, I come up to you and you're sitting on your front porch and I'm trying to do a story about the shooting down the street, I want to lower myself below your eye level. And it's just a way to suggest I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to listen. And it breaks ice that we might not even know exists.
All right, that same advice he gives about being lower is something that is contained in a video from Brandon Stanton for Humans in New York. He will do some things, and if I could find the video, I'll have to share it with you all next week. He will actually make his voice sound more high-pitched, which sounds ridiculous, but a deeper voice is scarier than a high-pitched voice. This is Brandon Stanton, the photographer for Humans in New York. And he will always go, kind of get down low to look less intimidating. And that same advice is being echoed here for interviewing. And remember, Stanton does interviewing, but also just photography. All right, before the interview, you want to visualize what will take place, practice your questions, maybe anticipate some of those responses, know where you're going, and set up an appointment if you're doing a formal interview and it's not a man on the street type thing. If you're going to get an interview with a member of administration at the high school or the AD or a teacher, you have to set that up in advance. You can't just catch these people off guard, and that's important to realize. Now with students, if you know in advance who you're going to speak to an interview, then we're going to say, all right, what period are they available? Does that line up with what period you have to do this? Do we need to ask permission from a teacher to see if they could step out for 10 minutes? These are things that involve planning. The winging it, seat of your pants, fly by the seat of your pants is not the most professional. It's not professional approach to these things. You want to let your source how you're going to record and why you will record it if you choose to do it. If you're going to take notes on your reporter's notebook that you got, if you are going to talk about if it's a phone interview and you want to record it that way, if you want to do broadcast. In some states, you must legally get the source's permission on tape or memory card before you record him or her. New Jersey is a single consent state, which means only one of the two parties has to know. However, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's ethical. We talked about ethics being that gray area. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so in this case, I'm going to argue that you should always, always, always let them know, and then get permission. Let them know what's going on. Same for texting. If you're texting classmates and talking to them, maybe asking them questions for a story, do they know this is for a story that you're doing? There's blurred lines sometimes when you're a member of the school community in which you teach. In which you're also a student reporting on. Sorry, that was confusing. What I meant to say is there can be blurred lines when you're a member of the community that you're also reporting on. So are you texting them as a friend or a person, or are you texting them, for the purpose of a story? You want to be transparent, and that was in that Society of Professional Journalists, the SPJ Code of Ethics. You want to start with an informal chat when conducting your interview. You always, always, always ask your source to spell his or her name and first and last name. You're going to need this whether you're writing a print article or you're doing a lower third in a video. You might want to ask any adults you're interviewing what title they want to use. For instance, do they want to go by, Dr. Renesky, or is it Ms. Gerst, or Mrs. Gerst, or Mr. Prime, okay? And you want to let the source tell you about his or her role in the story. If it's a topic, what's your role in all this is a question you could ask, but they might prompt that. It's also going to be helpful to ask students to go back what their grades are, so we're not constantly looking that up. Okay. Taking notes is something that is key. That's why you got your reporter's notebook, and you're going to observe the place you're interviewing them, if it is, in an office or something like that. And it's sometimes a good icebreaker to ask questions about what you see. If you're in Mr. Ramsey's office, or you're in Mr. Hinson's office, or you're in Mr. Ruiz, the attendance officer's office, or Coach Parks, the AD. The question I have posed here that you guys ultimately are doing the pear deck for is, what might you learn about a source from his or her environment? And there's several things, okay? If you see pictures of things, awards on the wall, you get a sense of their involvement in different activities, and that can give you a great point of conversation, and it might be relevant to what you're covering as well. All right, what else do I want to note here? This is true. Technology sometimes fails, but notes in a notebook are always easier to find. All right, listen carefully when you're talking to your subject of the interview. Rephrase answers for clarification. Be ready to ask follow-up questions. As the interview concludes, always, 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 always ask, is there anything you'd like readers to know, or is there anything I forgot to ask? Just for reference, I want to show you when we did our student council candidate interviews, if you click on any single one of them, I'll click on Mia here, I went back a slide. The last question we always, click on her again, goodness, is what's one question we should have asked but didn't? That is one of the best questions you can ask somebody at the end of the interview. What did we forget to talk about? Can you tell me? We did this same thing when we interviewed Board of Education candidates. I guess it ended up being 2 years ago. If I look up the Board of Education, Q&A with the Board of Ed candidates, and we clicked on these. I'll click on Mr. Antonassi. Oh, actually, his are down here. Tell us, did we not ask that? Maybe we didn't. I thought we did. But we should have. What did we forget to ask about is key. I think, honestly, for his, if I go back, I think that he said, no, I'm good. You asked everything you should have asked. No, I guess we didn't. We should have. I'm looking, did I? Did we? Yeah, I guess it was there. What question should we have asked but didn't? Yeah, that's in there. Okay. Those are good. That's always a way to close it. Get their contact information, an email or cell number. You might always say, I might call to follow up or double check a quote. Fact checking is essential. It's valuable to read back certain quotes that you may have written down if you didn't do a video interview, just to check for accuracy. Not to say, let me restate that. Not to let them change what they said, but to check for accuracy. All right, when the interview's over, you're not quite done. All right. It says transcribing interviews. I'm gonna say that typically we don't necessarily do that, but you can. It's maybe a bit too thorough for what our purposes usually are. The interview is key to have fresh original journalism. It's okay if you feel nervous or intimidated talking to people you don't know. Most people are. In fact, some of them are pretty nervous talking to you as well. If you're someone who doesn't think you'll ever muster up the courage to do the interview yourself, start off with smaller pieces to do that. All right, this last bit that I want to share with you is student David Perez, who conducted the interview with Ben Montgomery. He summarizes what he learned. So this was the kid who did the interview. This is actually at a convention for the Journalism Education Association, which I'm a member of. So let's see what this student journalist learned from interviewing Ben Montgomery.
Well, my name is David Perez. I'm a senior at Christopher Columbus High School. I'm the president of CCNN Live. Well, it's an interesting experience, and it's always interesting when you interview anyone, really, just to what you can get out of it. You come in thinking one thing, and you leave thinking something completely different. I came into the interview thinking, just some tips on interviewing, and it went beyond that, really, just more than just interviewing, it's developing a relationship with the subject. He spoke about how he had even an experience where he interviewed a bowler, and the kid was most comfortable when he was doing what he loved most, which was bowling. So I think that's the most important part as an interviewer for me. A lot of times you got to be open. You can't just be straight go ahead, because a lot of time you end up leaving with something that's better than what you expected. So you got to be open. You can't just ask questions that are going to lead you where you want to go. You also have to do things that's going to come up with an overall better answer.
Okay. So again, there was a student behind that entire interview at a journalism convention for high school students. All right, the more you interview, the better you get at it. Keep asking questions. Be curious. There are so many untold stories walking in the hallways of this school. Like, it's crazy. You think it's like, oh, well, it's COVID. There's not much to talk about. Every kid has a story and something cool related to their life, related to being their age, related to their specific situation. Again, I can't emphasize that enough. There's always a story to be told. Sometimes we just don't know it's there. Okay, so that is what we left off with yesterday, okay? You're going to have an assignment posted today about knowing the difference between open and closed questions, okay? So see that attachment? I think you'll find it pretty self-explanatory. All right, you guys are rock stars. I will see you on Tuesday next week, because we don't have school Monday. Woo! And so you're going to be in school Tuesday, Thursday next week, instead of your other coming Monday, Thursday. Okay, reach out to me with questions. I hope to be updating that grade book. I know it is not very updated. It's been hard to stay afloat, but we will do it. I appreciate your support, and I'm here to support you.